Hello and welcome. This is more of a spontaneous broadcast. Of course, it'll be saved for later. But I've been busy lately, and um, and I wanted to use this format to uh, kind of check out some ideas. Um, one of the hallmarks of PTSD and anxiety is avoidance. And I've been avoiding discussing depression, which is odd because I have a lot of experience with that. Um, but I think it's such an important subject that, I wanted to get it just right, or I didn't want to say the wrong thing. And, to prepare, I just watched Andrew Huberman's Understanding and Conquering Depression. And he's a neuroscientist. He's a neurologist, and he delivered on that. His his um, his 2 hour podcast goes into a deep dive into. Well, he starts out with kind of like a uh, a list of criteria, the diagnostic criteria, and describing that, which is good. I do that all the time. And then for a while there, and he acknowledges, like, stick with me on this, uh, stick with me on this, like, and he goes into a deep dive into all of the neurotransmitters and the history of all of that stuff. But was it conquering and understanding depression? Well, in a way, it's understanding depression. The rest of it tends to be a discussion on things like creatine and and eating things like omega 3s and all that stuff. And wouldn't it be lovely if we could just eat our way out of depression and eat our way out of like all sorts of medical things? Be very suspicious of people that uh, promise you results in your life based upon something that it's so nice because we all control what we eat, right? So, like, if we can eat, enough salmon, then, that has something that the SSRIs have, or no, I think yeah, the SSRI, serotonin, and that can help you boost your energy, right? And that's one of the symptoms of depression. But did it ever really get it around to conquering depression? Well, yes and no. And then there's always the caveat of go to your doctor, and I agree with that. Um, However, it came across more of taking a class in neuropsychiatry and neurotransmitters more than conquering the depression, and I'd like to talk about that. But first, let's talk about something more fun. I took some notes here. And a lot of this got sparked on watching the news. The news drives me crazy. I always have this debate whether or not I should watch the news, because on one hand I want to stay informed, and on the other hand I don't want to get depressed and see all of the people trying to sell advertising and time, and so they get sensationalistic. I remember Jon Stewart went on Fox News like 10, 15 years ago, and they tried to do an aha on him, like, see, Jon Stewart, you're just a wing of the Democratic Party. And he says, no, I criticize Fox News because of, the agenda they have. He says, and they said, well, what about the other ones? And he said, well, their bias is sensationalism and laziness. And I agree that that's the true state of the news. So I was watching the news, and there was the Trump Zelensky thing, and people used this phrase. Insanity is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Now, people say that all the time. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And it's attributed to Albert Einstein, which, by the way, is not true. He didn't. Maybe he repeated that, but that's not him. But he got kind of stuck with that. So it's really upsetting to hear people say that insanity, the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over and and expecting different results. And like I want to be constructive here and find the kernel of truth in there that it's counterproductive to not learn from your mistakes or to not learn from or not to reassess the situation into why you're doing this, right? Um, but the definition of insanity is things like hearing voices. And when I say hearing voices, I've worked a lot of inpatient units. By the way, I should establish some credibility here. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm licensed. I got my license back in 2010, which I can't believe it's been 15 years. I've worked in many, many hospitals and with the city's long-term poor of New York, research hospitals, and veterans hospitals, and I've seen a lot of things, and so I have experience. I'm also a CEO. I have a company here in Tokyo, and it's a subsidiary of the psychotherapy company I have in New York City. So between the licensing, the education, the PhD, the authorities vested in the state has invested in me, the experience and all that, I think I know what I'm talking about a little bit, now. Do I not do I know everything? To quote Goethe, Mephistopheles, I'm not omniscient, but I know a lot, right? And I do know that the definition of insanity is not doing the same thing over and over again and expecting results. It means like hearing voices, and not just like hearing voices like in your head. Like we can all do that. We have like those little clock radios in here. No, it sounds like my voice talking to you. And these voices, incidentally, they're never really nice. They're always kind of critical and mean. And actually, somebody did a study where they correlated between the, like, you ever do something and then in your head, like you say, "Oh, stupid," Well, the psychotic people actually hear that out loud. So while you might like embarrass yourself at dinner and be like, "Oh, that was a stupid thing to say," they'll actually hear it like someone else outside of their minds talking to them. That's insane. Not doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Delusions. I met somebody who thought she was pregnant with kittens. Isn't that? Yeah. I met Paul McCartney. I was doing a group therapy, an art group, and we go around introducing ourselves. And he's like, "My name is Paul McCartney. I travel the world making music and movies." And I'm, welcome, Paul. It's interesting because eventually, he was a great artist when in the art group, and he would like make these magnificent things like little portals like on a ship, like overlooking islands in the ocean. It's fun to analyze all that stuff. And one day the medications kicked in and he became himself again, and he became so sad, and his art sucked. And I said to him, I'm like, "Paul, I'm sorry, I've been calling you Paul this whole time. What's your name?" He's like, "Ah, my name's Fred." I'm making that up. And I said, "Well, what happened there, Fred?" And he goes, "Oh, I got confused. So that's insanity. Thinking the TV is talking to you, or thinking I am talking to you. Well, I am talking to you in a way, but I don't know who you are, right? Like, I have no idea where you're at, where you're living, and stuff like that. If you were psychotic, if you were insane, you would think that, like, I'm in on a conspiracy to get you. Have you ever seen, like, people being randomly attacked on the streets, by a schizophrenic person? They think the paranoid schizophrenics are the more intellectual, high functioning, their brains are really on fire. And, like if they think that you're in on the conspiracy, they believe that they really have to protect themselves. And if they can't avoid, then they'll attack. That's why that random stuff happens on the streets or in the subways or whatever. So anyway, I just had to get that off my chest. Insanity is not doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I mean, I get the sentiment of that, but it's not insanity. And incidentally, insanity is not a word that psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists use. That's a lawyer term. That's a legal term, defense, insanity defense. And I really wish that psychology and the legal stuff would enmesh a little bit better, but they don't. So, anyway, the next thing is communication. So, Trump and Zelensky had this thing the other day, and I hate doing dated material because, like, in 3 months, nobody's going to care about this. But I do couples therapy. And in couples therapy, one of the major things is like you're trying to forge a relationship. You're trying to live a better life together, right? So here comes Zelensky. He's got a big problem. Russia's being like on their soil, and people are getting hurt and stuff like that. And he's trying to think of a way at his wits' ends on how to try and get his needs met. And then Trump comes along and tries to get his needs met. So let's think about this like a couple. Now, I have no political skin in the game here. I'm not Ukrainian. I don't own a MAGA hat. Like I said before, I debate whether or not I should watch the news. But sometimes I like to throw something in the background while I'm doing my work, and I just happened to be watching this as it occurred, and I got really uncomfortable really quickly with the way it turned out. And maybe I'll make a video about this. But if you didn't see it, here's what happened. So, like, they're in the White House, and there's Zelensky in his outfit. They were teasing him for wearing kind of not a suit and wearing kind of military kind of looking stuff. Um, and they were all joking and having a good time, and everybody was smiling. And then apparently Zelensky's needs. Now, think about this in terms of a couple. A couple, everybody's going to come in there. Maybe one wants to be heard and acknowledged and respected, or maybe the other one is really resentful because the person doesn't respect the finances and doesn't close the toilet lid, and they feel like their needs are disregarded on a day-to-day basis, which is a long time if you live with somebody, right? So let's think about it in terms of a couple with, like, both have their needs, both have something they would like to change, and both have something invested in the relationship. So in this case, we've got the Trump on one side and the Zelensky on the other, and they both have something they want. Trump wants some minerals and stuff like that, and he wants to be helpful, and Zelensky wants protection. And so Zelensky gets a little alarmed because he's there to sign a deal to, like, get help and get and sign over some minerals to help him pay for his defense. And Trump is like, I don't want to, he's got his needs too. He's like, I don't want to get involved in a thing. I'm not going to make security guarantees. I'm going to just make a deal with you and help you. And then Zelensky, understandably, is a little bit nervous about this. He is. People have made promises to him before they were broken, so he wants a security guarantee, and Trump's not going to give it to him. And so you have two sets of needs, like a couple, and they're having trouble finding common ground, right? So Zelensky goes on about, like, security guarantees and what kind of diplomacy are you talking about? And so, like, in a couple situation, you want to enhance the communication. You want to speak from me, right? I'm not going to point the finger at you and tell you what you're doing, what you're thinking, and I'm going to try and be constructive. And so Zelensky is like, okay, what kind of things are you talking about? And the vice president just sort of just just says the things that's going to save your country. Okay, and and he's like, this isn't the appropriate place to talk about it, which I like the idea of, like, if things are getting heated, everybody take a break, fight privately away from the children. And he was saying, don't do this in front of the cameras to the American public. And this, the analogy for couples would be like, you don't fight in front of the children, you take it to closed doors and stuff like that. That's appropriate, right? And then Zelensky tells Trump, like, you're going to feel the pressure, you're going to feel something or whatever. I forget how it works. But, this is one of those things you just shouldn't do in a couple's therapy. You shouldn't tell the other people what they're going to feel. First of all, you're projecting the future and you're reading minds. And Trump, being from Queens, and a lot of the hospitals I worked in were in Queens and in Brooklyn and in Manhattan. And you're just walking into a trap because people like with experience like me and Trump and anybody from Queens and Brooklyn and Manhattan, they're going to take that and they're going to serve it right back up to you. It's like, don't tell us how we're going to feel. You can't tell us how we're going to feel. And he's right. You can't tell people how they feel. And it drives me nuts when I see couples and they say, you just want me to be like this, or you think you're all that. And I'm just like, can you talk about yourself? Can you talk about, like, okay, I'm worried that you know that what you have another agenda that you're not really saying, and it's going to make me upset, right? That's a whole lot different than you think you know everything, and you always and you never, all of these unhelpful things like in couples communication. And then you stick to one topic at a time. And when I'm in therapy with them, they'll start bringing up stuff from the past, and I'll write it down, and I'll be like, okay, what you're bringing up is important, and I wrote it down, and we're going to talk about that. But right now we're talking about this. And right now, like with the in the Trump Zelensky couples therapy example that I'm making up on the fly, the whole point is to sign an agreement and try and stop people from shooting at each other. That's Trump's agenda. Zelensky wants a little bit more than that, but let's just focus in on that, because the next thing that comes out of the vice president's mouth is he interrupts and says, have you said thank you? And Saturday Night Live did a great job of making a joke out of this. They're like, have you said thank you? And then Trump says, yeah. And have you said we're handsome? We're very, very handsome. So these are irrelevant from signing an agreement, right? But it's actually perfect. It's actually getting in the way of agreeing on things. It doesn't matter who apologized to who. It doesn't matter who's handsome. What we're talking about is an agreement. So anyway, communication is really important when it comes down to couples therapy, and it's really easy to get sidetracked. I don't know if I did a video on it, but go to Bunny Therapy and look for it, because there's a lot of really important things. We don't want to hit below the belt just to, like, shut people up. We don't want to use people's past intimate knowledge of the other person against them. We don't want to bring up anything from the past if it doesn't apply to today. We want to focus in on one thing at a time. We want to speak from our experience, because we can't tell people what they're doing and thinking. Okay. And that's just off the top of my head. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Um, this is something that occurred to me the other day, that's really interesting. And did it's about recreating yourself. Did you know that your body recreates itself pretty much every 7 to 10 years? Like every cell in your body, like, you may look older and stuff like that, but that's a brand new body you got there. I mean, imagine if your car did that, like, this car, you've been driving it around for 10 years, but it's like you only drove it for like 7 years, right? Um, your body recreates itself every 7 to 10 years, and it like your colon, the part like where the poop comes out of, that recreates itself about every 3 years. Can you imagine? It's only 3 years old. Your skin replaces itself in like a few weeks, and your heart replaces itself at a rate of about 5 to 30% a year. But your whole body is basically turned over and recreated every 7 to 10 years. Interesting, isn't that? And now, the interesting bit for me is that the gray matter part of your brain, the gray matter part of your brain, they think is not replaced in your lifetime. Like that part of your brain, the thinking part, is yours from birth to death, whereas the rest of your body gets recreated every 7 to 10 years. The thinking part of your brain never changes, right? And there's this thing called hippocampus or the thalamus. I'm blanking off the top of my head. I always mix the two up. They have that H sound in them. But it's the part with the memories. And I'm really bad with names, by the way. And that part of my brain just doesn't retain doesn't retain things very well. It's either the hippocampus or the thalamus. I'm pretty sure it's the thalamus. Anyway, so well, let's just find out. Okay, let's just go over here and say it's live, right? Um, Too bad I can't just take that. What part of the brain regulates memory? The hippocampus. All right, fine. Hippocampus it is. Hippo means horse. Hippopotamus means water horse, right? So the hippocampus changes, but the thinking part of your brain never changes. Your body reproduces itself every 7 to 10 years, and your hippocampus replaces itself slowly. But the thinking part that you're born with is yours for the rest of your life. It never gets replaced. So then what do we do with that? The good news is that part, even though it doesn't change and you're stuck with it, your brain, you can change the way you think instantly. You can change the way your mind is working with coping skills in the short term, and I mean like right now. Like there's ways to like reduce your activation from an uncomfortable level of like tension down to relaxation by doing like this prolonged breathing thing, like a sigh or a sigh with two quick intakes. You see little kids do that when they cry. And you can distract yourself. But more importantly, you can change the way that you look at the world. The way you look at the world is really important because it influences how you perceive the world and how you think and feel. Now, I'm going to get to the depression part because it's really important because the depression is based upon, your core values, your core beliefs about yourself, who you are, what you really believe. Are you an idiot? Are you an incompetent? Or are you like really clever and smart? Is the future a hopeless thing, or is it? Are you like in the driver's seat? Is the world a hostile place? They'll never accept me. I'll never get that job. Nobody will give me an interview. Or is it a place full of possibilities? Let me think about this. Maybe I need to find out the right person to talk to. You see, this is a different kind of profile, right? The way you look at the world and your brain, even though it never changes physically, it can change mentally very quickly, and the experience of your body will respond as well. And like CBT is a very popular psychotherapy for depression. And what it does is it identifies these core beliefs about the self. Am I incompetent? Is the world a foreboding place? And is the future full of bright hope and possibility? You'll see the thumbnail I made for this is a guy riding a wave, because our moods tend to run in waves. And when you're depressed, like I had a client who was, one of those ironically funny but sad people at the same time. He wrote comedy in Hollywood and stuff like that. And I wish I could tell you the name of his dogs because it was the funniest thing. The guy was so funny, but he had not terminal, he had chronic back pain. So he was always depressed. And he said that my depression's like a sine wave, like it goes up and down. I am making a video about this, but that's why I made the thumbnail. Um, but that's why I made the thumbnail. A guy riding the wave the way he did, because he's on the crest of the wave. And so, with CBT, they like to look at your deepest beliefs about yourself. And then what they'll do is they'll see how that informs how you come across things. Like, I've got a job interview coming up, and if you believe you're an incompetent fool and that the world's a place that'll never hire you and the future's hopeless, you're going to go into that interview a whole lot different than you would if you think that you're really, this is going to be a slam dunk, or if you have a fighting chance. And what's really interesting is that when people are in a depressed state and they show up for the job and they don't get it because of their core beliefs about themselves, then it'll inform how they think about the world. They'll say, "Oh yeah, it makes sense. I didn't get that job. Who am I? I really don't know what I'm doing. Why would they hire me?" And I guess that's just the way it is right now, forever. Like at the bottom of the trough, like the up and the down and the up and the down. And when you're down, the future is hopeless and the self is incompetent. And the world's a hostile place. But if you're not depressed and you don't get the job, then you'll be like, oh, those people don't know. They don't know what they passed up on, or um, like there's no budget for that job right now. Then I'll apply back, come back in a year when the market's better. But what if you do get the job and you're depressed? Then they're like, uh-oh, what do I do now, smart guy? They're gonna find out I'm a phony. Like, I'm gonna get fired. See, like there's no winning here with the depressed mind state. And if you're not depressed and you get the job, you could be like, yeah, I got that job. Check out that resume. I've got people skills. I've got an education. And who's going to stop me? Not that hiring manager. I've got this nailed, right? So the way you look at yourself is malleable. So even though your body reproduces itself every 7 to 10 years, but your brain doesn't, your brain can change faster than that body. You can recreate yourself immediately. You can create, you can change your mood states immediately. You can find new meaning in life immediately. And if you practice, it'll stick around for a long, long time. Now, there's nobody that's like got magic armor and that they're always going to be happy. And, this is one of those things where I think, it's really important that someone's got to say it. I volunteer. I'm going to say it. Um, People like come up with this nonsense that there's good emotions, there's positive emotions and negative emotions. Now, fair, if I'm being fair, I'm going to look for the kernel of truth. I think what they're talking about are emotions that are unpleasant, that may be unwanted, inconvenient, painful, scary, um, causes tension in the body, maybe interferes with sleep, that kind of thing. And then there's positive emotions like love and happiness and stuff like that. And I've got news for you. These are all colors on a palette to paint with. Now, sometimes I'll look at somebody's painted a picture and I don't like it. Is it a negative painting? No, it's just a collection of pigments on canvas. There might even be some technical things to appreciate about it. Um, but it's neither good nor bad. It's just a painting, right? Oh, I had a bad dream. Well, your brains just do that. Like, if we move away from the positive and the negative, because when you judge something to be negative, it changes the experience. And we can measure this, that people who sit there and evaluate things that should not be, that are unwanted, and they can't stand it, and they refuse to accept the reality of it, they suffer subjectively more than people who just tolerate the fact that something inconvenient's happening. So, are there positive and negative emotions? No. And I really wish people would stop saying that, because um, even though I get the point that they're after, and they have a point, right? I don't want to like set it up a me versus them kind of thing. It's not me versus them, but they have a point that there are such things as emotional states that could be described as negative, but they are neither negative nor positive. The danger with that is that we send the signal that we're not supposed to be that way, that it's a negative thing, and that being happy is a positive thing. Well, I've got news for you. Your brain isn't made to be happy all the time. If you are, you're probably manic. You're not meant to be sad all the time. If you are, something's wrong. And so let's talk a little more about depression. And let me tell you, there's times that I've been depressed like any other human being, and there's no reason why I shouldn't be depressed at some point in my life. But I forget just how hard it is, just the taxation on the body and the energy and the not being able to sleep and being woken up with like and having all these flooding thoughts and memories that come in. And I was like so pleased when I was asleep, and now I'm awake, and now I'm carrying around all of this painful affect, this painful way of thinking, so I forget about that. And so, like, with all due respect to Dr. Huberman, we can't eat salmon and get, I don't trust anybody that's talking about eating and taking supplements that wouldn't be prescribed to you by your doctor. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying, if like my perspective is, I've worked in many hospitals and many units. I've worked with many depressed people. I've met people who want to kill themselves. And by the way, people who try to kill themselves generally regret it. And if they do something that harms themselves long term, like their brain gets hypoxia or something like that, or they hurt themselves, they really regret it. Um, but I've never worked in a hospital with depression and they said, let's get them a salmon dinner stat. I mean, it just sounds absurd. So I take supplements. All right, fine. You take your supplements. But the doctors in the hospital, maybe they do it in a way that I don't get, but they don't say like, we have a case conference, like, okay, so what's the treatment plan? Treatment plan is salmon or salmon supplements. You just don't hear that, right? So I'm cautious and hopeful, because like I like research, I like research. And keep in mind, a lot of these professors, a lot of these people, a lot of people with grants, they live and die based upon research. So whether or not they are completely 100% invested in that, they're paid for it. And that's not a bad thing. We need researchers and we need to pay the researchers. We need to pay them well. I wish we paid them even better, really. But they got to come up with something and they got to get it peer reviewed, and that's a good thing. At the same time, they're going to be investigating whatever's in front of them. They're not. It's not like they've got like um the Rosetta Stone and they're going to transcribe the truth and all that stuff. What they're doing is the day to day bits of science, and it can be quite boring. You have to take established literature, find something in there, find the limit of it, ask a question about that one specific tiny little thing, test it, run through a statistical significance process, and then write it up and write all of the different statistical models, and then you write it up and you send it to your peers, people who understand, people in your field, and then they criticize it, and then you fix it, and then you publish it, and the general public doesn't understand it. All they hear is take salmon supplements. And I just want to just caution you on that stuff, because all of these guys will say, go ask your doctor. So let's just cut out the middleman. Go talk to your doctor. Right? So, how do we treat depression then? Setting aside all of the, I don't mean to roll my eyes. It's just, there is a more expedient message to help than discussing what you can eat. Well, the first line of defense is healthy body, healthy mind. Um, there are benefits. Dr. Huberman will go on and on about the neurotransmitters and hormones involved with this. But let me save you a bunch of time. Ask your doctor if you can exercise and then do it. It's healthy for all sorts of things. It protects against dementia. You'll feel more at calm and ease in your body. It'll extend your life. You'll have more energy to do the things that you value in life. So if you can, walk 20 minutes a day, that's good enough. Now, my license is restricted to psychology, so I'm going to defer to my physician friends, but I've worked alongside of them long enough to have a very good educated guess about how they'll respond to the suggestion that people within normal limits can exercise, and they probably should. And it doesn't take that much. We always have these mental barriers about why don't we do those things? And we're basically just selling ourselves stories, right? We're telling ourselves because it's unpleasant, and who wants to do something unpleasant? I don't. Did I want to do this? Yes and no. The idea of coming up here and just sort of winging it and looking at, like, right now, there's absolutely no viewers. People pop in and out, stuff like that, but it's recorded, so I'm not that worried about it. So psychotherapy. So the buffalo that roams the proverbial plain right now is positive psychology, solutions focused, and CBT, and probably some other thing. It's all the same when it comes right down to it. You have something that's your mind is like got that's unpleasant to confront, but if you make contact with it in a guided and helpful way, um, the avoidance, if you can stop the avoidance, then the symptoms tend to go down. So in the short term, you are going to feel the unpleasantness of looking at something you don't want to look at. like a sink full of dishes. Who wants to look at that? But if you lean into it and you take action, then pretty soon you're looking at a clean kitchen, and it lasts a long time. If you avoid it, it stays like that at best. But I'm going to go ahead and guess if you ignore those dishes long enough. I tried to outlast my roommate when I was like 20 years old. He was just such a pig. And so, he would make like these sausage things, like put them in the sink. And I didn't want to have to wash all of his dishes. So I decided to try and outlast him and see how that worked, but those dishes over a few days, pretty soon there was insects everywhere, little things flying around and stunk. And I'm just like, oh boy. Rather than doing the dishes, though, I had a conversation with him, and that helped. So avoiding doesn't really work. And so CBT has its one way, solutions focused has its way, positive psychology, I just have some problems with in terms of the message that it sends that you got to be positive and you should be happy. And they look for things that make you happy and all that stuff like that. And it's a fool's errand because you know what's going to make you happy? Living a well balanced life that includes unhappiness. And if you do it right, you have less unhappiness and more happiness, just like doing the dishes. If you go in there and you do it right, then even though it's unpleasant to wash the dishes for 15 minutes, then the rest of the day it's clean. Same thing with psychotherapy. You go in there and you look at the ugly stuff and you lean into it like once a week for an hour, and then you spend the rest of your life more comfortable, right? So, psychotherapy, it doesn't really matter what it is, what's important is to find somebody who really knows what they're doing, somebody that you can work with. And I don't care if it's your cardiologist, your dentist, your the guy who makes your coffee in the morning. The better relationship you have with them, the better it'll be. And are you going to have a bad cup of coffee sometimes? Sure. But overall, if you have a good relationship, you're going to be able to like get some favors or maybe ask a few things or get special treatment or just at least get a big smile at the beginning of the day, right? Um, but there's limits to psychotherapy, right? Psychotherapy is good for mild to moderate depression because I'm talking about depression right now. And if you lean into it, there are demonstratable, uh, just gazillions of studies that show that it works. And you know, um, but there's limits because if you are severely depressed, there is a limit to psychotherapy, and you're going to need to look at that medication. It's time to break out the salmon, but it's also time to break out the different antidepressants and other things that go through that. The deep, dirty little secret is we don't know exactly why it works, but it does. And there's a reason why the 1950s had tons of people in the locked up in those mental institutions, and they were empty by the 80s. It's because the medicines worked. They were effective. And so, if you are depressed and you're severely depressed, there might be a biological component that needs to be introduced into this because there is such thing as biology. As much as I'm a psychologist and think that like you should work within the brain that you're given and that you can change that, if you get to a certain level, depression can be really dangerous if somebody really believes that they're dirt, that the future's hopeless, there's no point in being alive, and it's never going to change. then the suicidal thoughts are automatic and natural. And I'd like to normalize that those suicidal thoughts. People say, "Oh," because if you say the wrong thing, they're worried they'll take you off to the hospital. But you know, people who have most suicidal thoughts are not like I'm ready to die. Like meaning I'm going to kill myself now. Most of the time, it's just these thoughts that, gosh, I wish this would stop. I just, I don't like myself. I don't like this world. I don't want to live this way. And I don't see any way out. Right. Well, of course, there is a way out, but like that little sine wave I'm talking about, they're deep down in that little trench there, and we got to get them back out. And sometimes you're going to need a little medical help, in at least in the short term, to get out of that. And and they work best together. They work best together, the therapy and the medication, because the medication can do so much. The therapy can really adjunct it to help be a peripheral witness to the changes, and be a place where people have something reliable and something to go to, a plan of action, a source of hope, a place to hold the hope. A lot of times they need you to hold on to the hope when they don't have any. And then when they're ready, you can give it back to them. Um, that said, there are limitations to the drugs. The drugs can only do so much. First of all, they don't always work on everybody. Just because you know, like there's a reason why they say, "Do you have any allergies?" Because some people they'll take a medication just fine. Other people they'll turn red and get anaphylactic. Um, and some people that just doesn't work at all. Had this one manic guy. I was convinced he was not taking his medication. And these mood stabilizers, unlike some of the antidepressants, you can take their blood and measure it. This guy was full of them. It just didn't work on him. And he was manic, manic, manic. I liked him. He was a lot of fun to have around. He had a good heart. He's just manic, and got him into some trouble. Yeah. But also here's a tough one: side effects. Oh my goodness, sexual side effects, like you don't want sex or it doesn't work. You know what I mean? Sometimes these drugs. Um, like imagine like my coffee cup from Hawaii. Imagine like each one of these little flowers is like a place where a little key goes in and like turns, and then your brain like it opens up kind of an activity in your brain. And if you stop taking it, then it locks back up and stops. Well, the old medications would like go to each one of these little flowers and turn them all on or turn them all off. We get better now. We're better at just targeting, say, that one, right? But it's taken a while to figure this all out, and one of them turned off the idea that you've eaten enough food. So the guy's taking his medication, the depression's going down, but he blew up like a balloon because his body forgot to tell him to stop eating. So the medications, their side effects, they don't always work on themselves. And then, what's the one of the weirdest things about the side effects of medications is suicidal thoughts. I had this one guy, was doing great, went on, I think it was Wellbutrin, and he's at dinner with his wife, and he was like, now I'm going to go home and kill myself. She's like, what? And he was like, yeah, just, you know, I'm at peace now. Let's just end this. And it was the medication talking. Um, so there's limits to the medication as well. Now, there's one other level of depression for severe depression that nobody talks about. and it is amazing. And it's shock therapy. You know, some people, I mean, time is progressing, so a lot of younger people probably have never seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, but we've come a long way since then, and we now we can just put the electrodes on one side, and I got to witness this, by the way. And what they want to do is they want to start a convulsion in you, get your brain to convulse, and like to have like a little kind of seizure kind of thing. And what they'll do is they'll strap you down and they'll put like a little thing in there so you don't bite your tongue. And they put a muscle relaxant in you. And it's amazing. You can watch the body as the muscle relaxant goes through the system and watch all the muscles slowly. And it's amazingly fast. I didn't realize your blood went around that fast. And then they zap you with the electrodes. And then you do like this convulsion, and they're hoping for a longer one. And then there's a recovery period of like 30 minutes or something like that, and it's amazing. They go from like severely depressed to like happy go lucky. I in one of the hospitals I worked with geriatrics, and there was this old lady who was like, she looked like she had been done up with like Hollywood makeup, like with old skin and purple, marks because she had fallen down. And if you asked her a question, you're like, "How are you?" She would look, and her brain is just so depressed. It's slow. And I'm thinking, does she even hear me? And all of a sudden she starts to say, I'm fine. And I decided, excuse me, I decided I was going to be a good therapist. I'm going to sit here with this lady, and I don't care if it's going to take all hour. I'm going to ask her 3 questions. That'll be our conversation. I was in graduate school at the time, so I didn't go back the next day. I went day after that. And I saw her and she come, hey, how you doing? And I thought, "Yeah, look at me. Look at the chops on this guy. I did my job and now she's better." No, wasn't me. She got ECT. She got electroshock therapy. And it works. Why does it work? Nobody knows. But nobody wants to talk about it either. And so there's psychotherapy. That's where you should start. If it gets depressive, and there's ways of measuring this, by the way, um, on paper. And and then if that doesn't work, you need to get a medical adjunct. And if that doesn't work, the shock therapy, it will work. Good luck on trying to find somebody that'll do it for you, but it will work. What else is on here? PTSD. I wanted to talk about PTSD because I've done a lot of work with PTSD. And what happens is something really bad happens, like, and by bad, I'm not talking about an emotion, I'm talking about an event that everybody can see. There's a difference between what happens inside of you, that's just your brain. But if someone mugs you, assaults you, combat, plane crashes, someone dies, something like that, that's traumatic. That's what I'm talking about. And something terrible happened. And um, what happens is after a month, if that memory sticks around, it activates the part of your brain that is looking for danger because it just saw something really dangerous. It has a memory of something dangerous. And now the animal part of you that has no sense of time doesn't realize that the danger has passed. So it's constantly on alert and it's keeping them awake. It's keeping them irritable, and they don't want to think about it and they want to avoid everything. And their whole lives become about this because they're avoiding everything, and it's just a memory now, and it's hard to explain that to someone because if you talk about it with them, they'll start to think it's happening again, to different levels. Some people will dissociate and just sort of nothing there, and other people think it's actually happening right now and they'll start acting it out. But the goal is to keep them in the sweet spot where they can connect to it, like I said before. And so I made this little thing here. Imagine each one of these little boxes is a memory. A PTSD big is a big memory, like there's another memory behind it. And it's blocking everything. It's in the way. But if you can talk about it and explain to them it's just a memory and get them to talk about it, then the memory part, I guess it was the hippocampus, lights up if you believe those spectrometer things, and then the animal part turns off because the memory processing kicks on, lights up like a Christmas tree, and then just the way it should be. The PTSD memory is in here with all of the others, and it only comes up when it should be. So before, that memory wasn't processed. This is a file folder from Japan. It's got on Asahi TV. And it's like trying to take its place amongst all of the other memories, but it's stuck because you're not talking about it, because you're avoiding it. But if you do it right, then it takes its place along with all of the other memories in the little file, which is your brain. So what else am I forgetting here? So drugs, limits to psychotherapy, physiological stuff. Um, yeah, remember, I'll go back to that one more time where people talk about like trying to eat their way out of stuff. There's no case conference where they said like, get that guy some yogurt and we'll get him better. I'm sure there's really promising research on all that, but it's a little early to tell you about it for a couple of hours and then say, what? Talk to your doctor, please. Talk to your doctor and then get something that's established. And if you want to be part of a clinical trial or if you want to try something out, it's America, you can do whatever you want. That's not true. You can do whatever you want within certain limits. And so, yeah. Well, we're coming up on 1 hour, and again, this was a spontaneous thing to sort of work on some of my ideas, kind of like a slow walk away from the avoidance to talk about depression because it is serious, and I'm a huge, huge fan of Huberman. Um, and so I watch him all the time. And I wanted to see. He mentioned 5% of people get depressed. So I've got the DSM here. This is the diagnostic manual. I want to look up mood disorders real quick. Why don't I just go to the back and look at major depressive disorder? That's what we call depression, major depressive disorder. And it has very specific criteria that are measured and cluster analyzed and lots of other big words. Major depressive disorder. And let's see here. CDs, medication, depressive, differential diagnosis, 183. So let's go to 183. And hopefully I will be within proximity of a description. So prevalence. 12-month prevalence of major depressive disorder in the United States is approximately 7%, not 5%, with marked differences by age group, such that the prevalence in 18 to 29-year-olds is threefold higher than in prevalence of people who are over 60. That's interesting, isn't it? And higher in reproducible findings, higher in women. That peaks in adolescence. Kind of makes sense. I have thoughts about that. And then stabilizes. So hang in there is the message. Women experience approximately twofold higher rates than men. Who knew? Why isn't this in the news? Zelensky's in the news, right? Oh, jeez. And Trump, and all that stuff. What about this? This is really important. People are depressed, and it's twice as much in women, and it's 7% of the population. Holy cow. Why isn't anybody talking about this like in plain language that everybody can understand? And women report, ooh, because when it comes down to diagnosing this stuff, it's either like you don't get enough sleep, or you get too much, or you eat very little, or you eat too much. The women are sleeping and eating more. Interesting. 12-month point and point prevalence of major depressive very 8 to 9 fold across global geographic locations. Non-Hispanic whites showed a significant increase in prevalence after adjustment for democratic characteristics, whereas no significant change among blacks, non-Hispanics. So non-Hispanic blacks or Hispanics seem to be a little bit more resilient than the non-Hispanic whites. Interesting. And it can appear at any age, but more likely in puberty. Okay, I'm going to nerd out on this, and it's been an hour. So hopefully others will be able to revisit this. But I covered a number of things, and I'd like to think that I offer you a value you're not going to get anywhere else. And as a result, since I'm not lazy or sensational, and I don't have a political agenda, nobody's going to care. But it's out there, it's on the record, and somebody's going to see it, and they'll be better off for it. And if you did watch it, hey, could you do me a huge favor? Like, I hated this about these things before, but like, apparently these YouTube channels like it if you comment. So if you could say, "You suck, Dr. Fur," that'd be great. Or if you say, "You rock, Dr. Fur," that's great. And if you want to like ring the little bell so you hear, because I put out tons of like little things, and I have a pretty unique perspective on this stuff. And it comes again from authority, experience, a discerning taste. And I think I can communicate in a way that YouTube likes, whereas the young people like someone that they can relate to, and the older crowd looks like somebody that knows what they're talking about. I am both of those things. And so I wish you mental health, and I wish you I wish a comment from you. Tell me how lousy I was and how boring I was, or how great and fascinating I am. And I could do my JD Vance. Did you say thank you? Or Trump? We're also very handsome. and and I could do my Zelensky. If you don't feel it now. You have a nice ocean away from you from depression, but soon you will feel it, because you are going to feel depressed at some point. Come back here and subscribe. Yeah, why not? And and it's one of those things where like all you have to do is like hit a piece of glass on your phone or something like that. Give a dog a bone. Anyway, I hope wherever you are in whatever part of the world, you take care of yourself. Don't avoid. Go to a doctor. Exercise. And live the life that you really want to live, because you can. I'll end with that message. Your body takes 7 to 10 years to replace itself. I thought this was brilliant, but you can change your mind now.